When President McKinley got shot in 1901, 42-year-old Teddy Roosevelt became the youngest president ever, and the country would never be the same. America was modernizing, and Teddy Roosevelt was the right man to lead the United States into the 20th century. Teddy's energy was legendary, and he didn't let up as commander-in-chief. Domestically, TR promoted the idea that government should aggressively look out for the little guy. He tried to curb the power of corporations. He protected consumers with new regulation of food and drug safety, and he conserved millions of acres of wilderness for public use. The whole package was known as the Square Deal. Internationally, he pumped up America's influence. Roosevelt oversaw the building of the Panama Canal and declared the U.S. was the policeman of the Western Hemisphere. He traveled abroad and even won the Nobel Peace Prize for mediating the end of a war between Russia and Japan. But most important was the way Roosevelt did his job. He developed his own policies, and if Congress didn't agree with him, he appealed directly to the public for support or simply signed an executive order to put his policies into place. He wasn't squeamish about using his power. TR thought the president should do anything the nation required unless forbidden by the Constitution or the law. He was an activist like this country had never seen, and that's why they call him the first modern president.
America's role in international affairs continued to grow. France, Great Britain, and the United States had all envisioned a world in which a canal could provide a shortcut between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. As early as 1850, Great Britain and the United States had agreed to share operating rights of such a canal if it could be built. However, in 1901, Britain granted exclusive rights to such a canal to the United States. In the late 1800s, France had attempted to build a canal in Panama, but their efforts had failed. In 1903, President Roosevelt and Congress purchased the rights to this Panama route for $40 million. Roosevelt saw the completion of a canal in Panama as a military and economic necessity for the United States, and he was determined to make it happen. Panama, at that time, was controlled by neighboring Colombia. When negotiations with Colombia to build the canal failed, Roosevelt worked closely with French officials to orchestrate a revolution in Panama. When the fight for Panamanian independence broke out, Roosevelt sent Marines and nearly a dozen warships to Panama to secure control of the territory in the Isthmus of Panama. 15 days later, the Hay-Buena-Viria Treaty was signed with Panama, granting the U.S. control of the Canal Zone area. The U.S. agreed to pay Panama $10 million, plus an annual rent of $250,000 for control of the area. Construction of the canal began in 1904, and the completion of the project remains one of the world's greatest engineering feats. More than 43,400 workers battled diseases such as malaria and yellow fever, unfavorable terrain, hot, humid weather, and torrential rainfall. Work was not completed until 1913, and some 5,600 workers lost their lives due to accidents and disease. The total cost for building the canal was $380 million. The canal opened on August 15, 1914, and more than 1,000 ships passed through during the first year of operation. However, U.S. efforts in helping to stir up the rebellion in Panama, along with the aggressive naval actions in the area, greatly damaged America's image in Latin America. Resentment of the United States would simmer in the region for decades to come.
The process of transiting the Panama Canal is very similar for every vessel, from a sailboat to an enormous cruise ship. Each vessel accesses the locks through their gates to reach a height of 26 meters above sea level. A control house operator closes the gates to the locks and then opens the valves that control the water flow. It takes 8 minutes to fill the chamber to elevate the ship, which is kept in the center of its transit by locomotives. This operation is almost exactly the same at the 3 sets of locks in the Panama Canal. It takes between 8 and 10 hours to transit the Panama Canal from ocean to ocean. More than 10 million ships have done it since its opening.
In 1787, the Constitution promised equality for all Americans, but at the opening of the 20th century, nothing could have been further from the truth. Women possessed no political rights, and blacks were free in word only. However, the nation's greatest inequality paid no attention to race or gender. It lay in economics, in the conflict between capitalists and labor. American workers had formed trade unions as early as Jackson's presidency, but they had little power to effect change. Then, in the 1880s, unions such as the United Mine Workers arose in the eastern coal fields as a counterbalance to the power of the mine owners and operators. In the 1890s, unions began agitating for better working conditions throughout the country. Their weapon was the strike, a refusal to work until their demands were heard and met. Strikes at first were viewed as criminal and brought harsh responses not only from the factory owners but state and federal authorities. The Homestead Strike in 1892 pitted steel workers against Pinkerton detectives and the state militia. Eventually the strike ended with the union smashed. But in 1902, a remarkable event happened that changed the face of labor and industry for the 20th century. At that time, coal was the lifeblood of the country. It powered the railroads. It fueled the country's factories. And most importantly, it heated the homes of the country's families. So when in the spring, the United Mine Workers, led by John Mitchell, went out on strike, the nation knew that something would have to be done before the next winter. As the price of coal skyrocketed to the consumer, labor called for mediation. The owners refused and chose to break the union. They insisted that President Roosevelt issue an injunction against the union and use the army to end the strike. But the callous attitude of the owners shifted the sympathy of the country to the union. Roosevelt, provoked by the owners' arrogance and stupidity, informed them that he was prepared to use troops to dispossess them of their property and produce coal. When the owners realized that Roosevelt was serious, they relented. By March 1903, a Roosevelt Commission awarded labor a 10-cent raise in wages and reduced the working day to 9 hours. The significance of Roosevelt's actions was enormous. With his intervention, Roosevelt allied himself with labor against the behavior of industrialists like Rockefeller and Morgan, whom he later indicted as the malefactors of great wealth. The road for workers over the next 100 years was far from smooth. But Roosevelt served notice that from 1902 on, labor would play a major role in the political life of the country.
October 17, 1901, the Atlanta Constitution. Tonight, just before 8 o'clock, a Negro in evening dress presented himself at the White House door and, giving his name, said that he was to dine with the President. Booker Washington has made several visits to the White House, and his face is known there, so he was at once admitted into the private apartment.
Within hours of becoming president, Roosevelt had wired Booker T. Washington, president of the Tuskegee Institute and the most powerful black man in America, asking him to come and see him. Each man wanted something from the other. Negro citizens had been brutally and systematically disenfranchised throughout the South. Washington wanted the new president's assurance that he would continue to appoint African Americans to federal jobs and resist those Republicans who wanted to crack the solid Democratic South by turning the party of Lincoln lily white. Roosevelt, on the other hand, wanted to make sure that he, and he alone, controlled all the black delegates to the Republican convention in 1904. The dinner invitation for Washington was a matter of simple courtesy, he said. The very fact that I felt a moment's qualm on inviting him because of his color made me ashamed of myself and made me send the invitation. A reporter for one of the wire services noticed Washington's name in the register of visitors and filed a story. Although black slaves had built the executive mansion and black servants had waited upon all of its occupants, no black American had ever dined there before. And not only had the president dined with Washington, but he had done so in the company of his wife and teenage daughter, Alice.
White men of the South, how do you like it? White women of the South, how do you like it? The Negro is not the equal of the white man. Mr. Roosevelt might as well try to rub the stars out of the firmament as try to erase that conviction from the hearts of the American people. New Orleans Times, Democrat.
The action of President Roosevelt in entertaining that nigger, said Senator Ben Tillman of South Carolina, will necessitate our killing 1,000 niggers in the South before they will learn their place again. The president was astonished at the furor. I would not lose my self-respect by fearing to have a man like Booker T. Washington to dinner, he wrote, if it cost me every political friend I have got. Washington remained Roosevelt's most important African-American ally. But the president never again asked him or any other black person to dine at the White House.
William Howard Taft was our nation's 27th president. When Teddy Roosevelt said goodbye to the White House, he left some pretty big shoes to fill. That could be why he handpicked William Howard Taft to follow in his footsteps. Tipping the scales at more than 330 pounds, Taft was our heaviest president and was known for being an all-around jovial man. Think Santa Claus, but in a darker suit.
Ho, ho, ho!
After all the work the popular Mr. Roosevelt did, Taft came into office thinking he could relax a little. Unfortunately, Taft got himself stuck in the White House bathtub and had to have a new tub built that was big enough to hold him. That meant it was also big enough to hold 4 regular-sized presidents.
Can you pass the soap, Richard?
Taft faced challenges that were larger than he was. People expected him to keep up Roosevelt's progressive social policies and fight big business. And when it came to trust busting, Taft put his weight into it.
A trust was a monopoly. It was like a telephone company that all the telephones belonged to it, so it could make you pay however much they wanted to, because if you wanted a telephone, there was no place else to go.
In the progressive era, a trust was, well, not always to be trusted. They made it hard for the little guy to compete, and progressives made a big deal about helping out the little guy. And Taft set out to finish the job that Teddy started. Standard Oil, Taft emptied their tank. American Tobacco, Taft crushed them. All in all, Taft filed up to 90 antitrust cases while he was president. But Taft wasn't all anti-business. He believed in dollar diplomacy and thought that loaning other countries lots of dollars would help them behave diplomatically. The president convinced American bankers that they'd make big bucks investing overseas in projects like a Chinese railway.
All aboard!
Taft, like Roosevelt, also did a lot to protect the great outdoors. He expanded national forest reserves and established more national parks. But no, he didn't take up hiking. And while becoming president is supposedly the top job in the nation, William Howard Taft had even bigger dreams. He wanted to be Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And in 1921, after he left the presidency, Taft's dream came true when he took the bench. Eventually, the former president even swore in a new president, Herbert Hoover, in 1929. Coming right after Roosevelt and right before World War I, Taft may not have been one of our biggest presidents, but he was definitely one of our Okay, you get the picture.
Benjamin Franklin once wrote that in this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes. If you've ever held a job, chances are you've paid a federal income tax. You don't have much of a say in the matter. Taxes are the federal government's primary source of revenue, They've been a necessary evil since 1861, when the cost of the Civil War forced Congress to impose a 3% fee on personal incomes over $800. Paying taxes became mandatory with the 16th Amendment in 1913. An average American is taxed at a rate of 10.1%. The United States runs on a progressive income tax system, where those that earn more money pay a larger percentage. But due to loopholes, deductions, and other tax benefits for the rich, some of the wealthy end up paying lower rates than the poor and middle class. Regardless, the richest 20% still pay the lion's share of taxes, nearly 87%. But where does all that money end up? A majority pays for 3 different services: Social Security for retired workers, healthcare programs like Medicare and Medicaid, and national defense spending. Another chunk goes to safety net programs like food stamps and housing assistance, and interest payments on the national debt. The remainder of your tax dollars maintains the basic services you use every day: the roads you drive on, the cleanliness of your drinking water, and the quality of schools in your neighborhood. But while debate rages on over the best way of collecting and spending taxes, one thing is for certain: there's no avoiding them.
Getting elected president is an expensive business. Campaign costs add up. There are advertisements to make, travel expenses, convention costs, even bumper stickers. But where does all this money come from?
In the early 20th century, industrialization was transforming America top to bottom. The progressive movement attempted to deal with these problems. Progressives thought citizens should have more input into government. They thought government could protect and stabilize society with scientific precision. And their superstar was Democrat Woodrow Wilson. Teddy Roosevelt and Taft were progressive presidents, but Wilson beat both of them in the 1912 election and took things to the next level. Wilson, a former political science professor, made sure he was in charge of his party and not just the White House. Carefully managing the Democratic Congress, he enacted a stunning series of laws. He reduced tariffs, established the Federal Reserve banking system, and expanded regulation of big businesses. His second term, he tried to transform the world. When the U.S. entered World War I, Wilson said the United States had the duty to make the world safe for democracy. That moralistic message transformed foreign policy. During peace negotiations, he tried to create a League of Nations to prevent future wars. But by 1919, people were tired of change. Republicans were back in control of Congress, and they kept the U.S. from joining the League. Wilson, meanwhile, had a stroke and could barely function. He changed the presidency, but the stress nearly killed him.
One Army captain is determined to find a different way. His name is George S. Patton.
Patton's ancestors fought in the Revolutionary War. They fought in the Civil War. He grew up wanting to be a military hero. He has a reputation for being smart, tough, and for being ruthless. And he had another quality that's essential in military leadership. He understands the power of technology, and he doesn't want to fight with cavalry and with horses. He's looking for a new technology that will change the nature of the battlefield. So the car is fairly new. If you strap a gun to a car, you've got a new instrument of warfare.
What Patton doesn't know is that he's about to revolutionize warfare.
I think Patton knew only one direction, and that was forward. He had a lot of charisma. He was a very colorful leader. I thought he was very egotistical. And that's fine as long as you translate that into good leadership, but maybe a little bit over the top.
One Army captain is determined to find a different way. His name is George S. Patton.
Patton's ancestors fought in the Revolutionary War. They fought in the Civil War. He grew up wanting to be a military hero. He has a reputation for being smart, tough, and for being ruthless. And he had another quality that's essential in military leadership. He understands the power of technology, and he doesn't want to fight with cavalry and with horses. He's looking for a new technology that will change the nature of the battlefield. So the car is fairly new. If you strap a gun to a car, you've got a new instrument of warfare.
What Patton doesn't know is that he's about to revolutionize warfare.
I think Patton knew only one direction, and that was forward. He had a lot of charisma. He was a very colorful leader. I thought he was very egotistical. And that's fine as long as you translate that into good leadership, but maybe a little bit over the top.
Like Roosevelt, Wilson seemed to ignore or fall short on racial issues that continued to plague America. As a Democrat, Wilson avoided addressing issues such as women's suffrage and civil rights, which he feared would divide his party. During his first presidential campaign, Wilson won the support of white liberals and the NAACP. Wilson promised to treat black Americans equally and to take measures to prevent lynching in the South. Once in office, many argue that Wilson failed on his promises. Racial segregation, which had not happened in most federal buildings in Washington, D.C., began while Wilson was in office. As president, Wilson opposed the federal government taking a stand on lynching in the South, claiming that the issue of preventing the crimes fell under the jurisdiction of state governments. Also, many of Wilson's appointments to cabinet and other federal positions were white Southern Democrats who supported segregation. Josephus Daniels, Wilson's Secretary of the Navy, took extensive measures to segregate everything from towels and drinking fountains to rooms and living quarters within his department. As the segregation of the government continued, many African Americans felt increasingly betrayed by the president they had supported. Some, such as William Monroe Trotter, editor-in-chief of the African American newspaper, The Guardian, openly criticized the administration's policies. In November of 1914, President Wilson invited Trotter to the White House. Trotter's meeting with Wilson ended in a heated exchange, as Trotter argued that segregation was humiliating to African Americans. Wilson took offense to Trotter's statements, tone, and wagging finger, and angrily ordered Trotter's delegation to leave, declaring, "If this organization wishes to approach me again, it must choose another spokesman. Your tone, sir, offends me." While African Americans had to continue their quest for civil rights without the help of the progressives.
In 1910, William Monroe Trotter succeeded in shutting down stage productions of The Klansman, but he was unsuccessful in 1915 with screenings of the movie Birth of a Nation, which also portrayed the Ku Klux Klan in favorable terms.
By the way, this was the very first motion picture screened at the White House.
On the evening of March 21st, 1915, upon seeing Birth of a Nation, Woodrow Wilson was quoted as saying,
"It is like writing history with lightning, and my only regret is that it is all so terribly true."
On April 11, 1913, recently inaugurated President Woodrow Wilson received a plan from Postmaster General Albert Burleson to racially segregate the railway mail service. Mr. Burleson said that he found it intolerable that white and black employees had to work together and share drinking glasses and washrooms. That sentiment was shared by others in President Wilson's administration. By the end of 1913, black employees in several federal departments had been relegated to separate or screened off work areas and segregated laboratories and lunchrooms. In addition to this physical separation from whites, black federal workers were appointed to menial positions or reassigned to jobs slated for elimination. Although implemented by his subordinates, President Wilson defended racial segregation in his administration as in the best interest of blacks. Segregation in federal employment was seen as the most significant blow to black rights since slavery, and seemed to signify official presidential approval of Jim Crow policies in the South. After backlash that included organized protests by the NAACP, segregated laboratory signs were removed, but discriminatory customs persisted, and there was little concrete evidence of actual policy reversal.